zombie virus sweeps through Ptown. Nick and his girlfriend Molly fled the city, planning to head to the airport for refuge abroad. Molly suddenly got out of the car halfway through the walk. She threw up all the New Year's dinner she had eaten last month. As they prepared to continue their drive, they realized the tires were slipping and the car was stuck in deep sand. Pressing the gas pedal to the floor yielded no results. Nick was about to call their friend at the airport for help, when Molly, standing behind him, gasped in surprise. She noticed a zombie approaching not far away. Nick quickly grabbed his pistol from the car and accidentally dropped his phone on the ground. There was no time to pick up the phone on the ground and Nick immediately pulled the trigger on the approaching zombie. 1 shot, 2 shots. Finally the last shot hit the zombie, but their joy was short-lived. The fallen zombie rose up again. Without hesitation, Nick raised his hand for another shot, but unfortunately, he missed the vital spot. As Nick continued to shoot, he realized he had run out of bullets. With the zombie closing in, they had no choice but to quickly take refuge inside the car. Closing the windows before the zombie reached them, they intended to call for help, but then they remembered the phone was left outside. Now they had to wait for the zombie to leave before retrieving the phone. However, this particular zombie was stubborn and remained there even into the night. Just when the two didn't know what to do, the zombie suddenly disappeared from sight. They looked around and saw no sign of the zombie. This was the perfect opportunity to retrieve the phone. They decisively got out of the car and started searching. To their surprise, just as Molly picked up the phone from the ground, the zombie attacked Nick from behind.
You got any service?
Molly quickly took all the supplies from the car and abandoned Nick, leaving the area. Exhausted, Molly eventually stopped and rested on the spot until the next day arrived. Hastily, Molly called their friend at the airport to inform them of her unexpected situation and asked them to wait. However, before she could finish her sentence, her phone suddenly lost signal. Nevertheless, Molly picked up her backpack and started trekking to the airport on foot. Molly just kept walking and walking into the night. The nighttime desert temperature was bitterly cold, forcing Molly to start a campfire for warmth. To her disbelief, the zombie seemed to have a built-in navigation system and continued following her. Molly pushes the zombie away as hard as she can and then quickly climbs up a large rock to the side. Molly looked around but didn't see any trace of zombies. Because she was so tired, Molly slept through the night without realizing it. However, as soon as Molly opened her eyes, she realized that the zombies hadn't left. Fortunately, zombies couldn't climb, or else it would have been a disastrous situation. But what puzzled Molly even more was how the zombie could always find her with such precision. Molly attempted to lure the zombie away with a wooden stick, but it didn't fall for the trick. That's when Molly suddenly thought of something. Could it be because she was menstruating these past few days that the zombie was relentlessly pursuing her? Acting on her idea, Molly quickly took out a blood-stained sanitary pad. The zombie immediately became excited upon smelling the familiar scent. Decisively, Molly threw the bloody tampon into the distance, and the zombie followed, picking it up and trying to stuff it in its mouth. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Molly planned to make her escape. However, she accidentally slipped and fell heavily to the ground, alerting the zombie with the noise. The zombie hears the sound and the tampon in his mouth is no longer attractive. Molly quickly got up and ran towards the camping area, swiftly packing her belongings and leaving before the zombie caught up. Although the zombie was not fast, it was like a piece of dog paste that could not be shaken off. If she stopped for even a short rest, she was likely to be caught. Despite reaching her physical limits, Molly couldn't afford to stop. At this moment, Molly finally understood that as long as her period didn't end, she couldn't escape from the zombie. Fortunately, as long as she maintained a normal pace, the zombie couldn't catch up. Like this, Molly and the zombie walked together for an unknown length of time until she spotted a dilapidated house. She intended to rest there for a while. However, just as she lay down, the zombie appeared outside the house again. In her desperation, Molly hid in the bathtub and endured the scorpions crawling on her body, but she didn't dare make a sound. Fortunately, the zombie didn't discover Molly. When it was safe, Molly continued on her way. Molly couldn't believe it. Just when she stopped to take a sip of water, the zombie appeared again not far away. She had reached her breaking point. She had considered facing the zombie head-on in a fight to the death, but the thought of her boyfriend's fate made her abandon that idea. She could only drag her weary body and continue moving forward. Since she couldn't shake off the zombie, she had to face reality. Molly seems to have gotten used to the zombie behind her and even started to engage in friendly interactions with the zombie. The zombie couldn't speak, so it silently endured. She even gave the zombie a name, calling it Smalls. At night, Molly camped at a high spot, and Smalls remained steadfast by her side. The next day they marched on, with Smalls still following behind. However, as they walked, Molly noticed that something was amiss. The wind seemed to be picking up. Molly looked up and saw a sandstorm approaching in the distance. It was too late to escape. Molly was instantly engulfed by the sandstorm. When she regained consciousness, she saw a passing car. Molly mustered up her last bit of strength and desperately called for help. The occupants of the car noticed her, and Molly couldn't help but laugh with relief. She accepted the water they handed her and quickly drank the entire bottle. After a brief exchange, they helped Molly onto the car and went to search for her dropped backpack. Sitting in the car, enjoying the coolness of the air conditioning, Molly thought about checking herself in the mirror to see how she looked. However, she accidentally noticed a photo that clearly didn't belong to the two people in the car. A feeling of unease washed over Molly, and she turned to look at the back seat. To her horror, she discovered a blood-stained garment. Molly finally realized that these two individuals were the killers. Tried to escape, but just in time for the two men to return. She wanted to make an excuse and escape, but her panicked demeanor had already aroused their suspicion. In the next second, they locked the car doors. The man in the back suddenly wrapped Molly's head with a plastic bag and pulled her out of the car. The screams alerted Smalls. Buried in the yellow sand, Smalls immediately sprang into action and attacked the man from behind. The other man was terrified and hastily fled. In his haste, he accidentally dropped the supplies from the car. Molly quickly picked up the dropped items and prepared to leave. Molly was surprised to find an inflatable raft among the supplies. She could now put her belongings in it and drag it along. A well-fed Smalls follows Molly again. Molly reached a place filled with stacked tires and glanced back at Smalls. A bold idea struck her, and the following scene unfolded. Smalls became a tool for Molly, which made it much easier for her. Molly checked her phone and realized she was only a few kilometers away from the airport. She decided to continue the rest of the journey alone and tied Smalls up. However, as soon as Molly took a few steps forward, Smalls began to wail incessantly. After all, Smalls had just saved her life. Unable to abandon Smalls, Molly removed the tires to see if Smalls would attack her. To her surprise, Smalls didn't harm Molly, and so a strange combination was born. Just as Molly and Smalls had walked a short distance, Molly spotted several military vehicles approaching from a distance. Fearing for Smalls' safety, Molly quickly hid Smalls by the side of the road and then asked the soldiers for help. However, Smalls didn't understand Molly's intentions and managed to break free from its restraints. Coming closer to Molly, witnessing the soldiers about to pull the trigger, Molly had no choice but to shield Smalls behind her and claimed that it was her mutated husband. The soldiers, hearing Molly's words, didn't trouble them further and prepared to leave. However, after getting into the car, a soldier suddenly fired at Smalls. The shot prevented Smalls from standing up. Molly tried to pull Smalls up but was accidentally bitten on the finger. If not treated promptly, Molly would turn into a zombie as well. She quickly disinfected the wound with alcohol, but it proved to be ineffective. In order to save her own life, Molly had no choice but to pick up a stone and forcibly smash her finger. After briefly dressing the wound, Molly returned to Smalls' side, but it was still unable to stand. Don't want to abandon Smalls just like that. Molly used the inflatable raft to drag Smalls along and continued on their way. Finally, after completing the arduous final stretch, Molly caught sight of the airport that was within reach, and by now Smalls is on his deathbed. Molly took out a wallet from Smalls' clothes and discovered a handsome man and a beautiful wife in the photo. Molly realized that even if she dragged Smalls to the airport, there would be no way to bring it along. Leaving Smalls here would only mean waiting for death. Therefore, Molly had to make a difficult decision. Picking up a stone from the roadside, she bid farewell to Smalls. Soon, Molly arrived at the airport and reunited with her friends who had been waiting for her. Jimmy informed Molly that there were originally 4 of them, but 2 were bitten by zombies and were locked inside a room. The plane had been repaired, and they were about to head to Mexico. However, just before leaving, Molly made a different choice. Molly realized that she couldn't leave because she remembered her child who was still in the city. Molly used to be a very messy woman, which led to her husband divorcing her and taking their son with him. Through the life and death escape during the apocalypse, Molly finally understood the importance of family. She decided to go back and be with her child. However, as Molly prepared to leave in a car, she realized there were no keys in the vehicle. Suddenly, she remembered what Jimmy said: the keys were likely on one of the mutated companions. Armed with a spanner, Molly broke into a nearby building. Molly found a dead body lying on the ground but couldn't find the keys in its clothes. Molly continued walking further inside. Suddenly, a zombie burst through the door and lunged at Molly. She forcefully pushed it away and then used a wrench to kill the zombie. However, the key was still not on the zombie's body. Then Molly noticed another zombie. She intended to kill it, but the zombie swiftly turned around, causing Molly to freeze in fear. The zombie lunged at her, ready to bite. Luckily, there was a power drill nearby at a critical moment. Molly grabbed the drill and killed the zombie, finding the key on its body. She then got into a convertible sports car, slammed on the gas pedal, and rushed towards her home. When Molly arrived on the town streets, it was a scene of devastation. Charred corpses were scattered everywhere. Quickly, she grabbed a shovel for self-defense. Returning to her house, Molly discovered her husband had already died. Molly searched many places on the second floor but couldn't find her son. Despair filled her heart until she suddenly spotted her son's small tent. Opening the tent, Molly found her son safely inside. Mother and son embrace each other and cry. There was no time to grieve. They had to leave this place. Molly and her son walked down the stairs, and outside there was already an influx of zombies. Molly protects her son and prepares to fight the zombies to the death. And the movie abruptly ended here. Although the audience didn't witness the movie's conclusion, they believed that Molly, for the sake of her son, would undoubtedly fight her way out of the siege.